All right, we'll call the council meeting to order. Everybody stand for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, take the roll.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here.
Morissette.
Here.
Wakefield. Here. Knudsen. Here. Kennedy.
Here.
Rook.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
All right, it's time for comments and suggestions from citizens present. This is your opportunity to talk about anything that is not currently on the agenda for this evening. If you do have a comment, please come forward, identify yourself and your address at the podium, and try to keep your comments brief. Try not to repeat other people's comments. Does anybody have a comment? Carrie, how you doing?
Good, good. I actually have two comments, but one has to do with the budget. Would you prefer that I wait until that portion of the agenda?
That's a public hearing item, and that is on the agenda, so
Okay.
you would have to wait for that.
My name is Carrie Rice. I live on Lee Circle here in Hudson, and I wanted to take a moment to just express my appreciation for the service of Aaron Reeves. He works hard for us, and he has over the last few years during a particularly difficult period of time for all of us. Not everyone has always behaved towards him in a civil way, and I just want to say he's brought a level of professionalism to the job that for anyone who's been in a leadership role you appreciate. So Aaron, we'll miss you, and I just want to say thank you.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. Any other comments? Any other comments? Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll close that portion of the agenda. Public hearing. We have a public hearing on the proposed 2024 budget and levy. Once again, this is your opportunity to speak on this subject. And if you do have a comment, please come forward, identify yourself. And here at the mic and the podium, it is a public hearing, so we also have the opportunity for people to Zoom in and comment via Zoom. Do we have anybody on Zoom? Do you know? We do? Okay, so.
Looks like we have one person.
One person. And if you are on Zoom and you want to make a comment, please click the button to raise your hand, and we'll get to you when we get a chance. Welcome back.
Welcome back. It's a repeat. Hello. One of the roles that I serve is I'm on the Hudson Area Public Library Foundation Board. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for the funding that I see in the proposed budget. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of dialogue about the public library. From my experience and what I've witnessed, there's a tremendous amount of appreciation and support for what the library offers. As a foundation board member, part of what we do is raise money for the programs that the library sponsors. Last year, we did a big ask of this community, and this community stepped forward, recognizing it was a transition year. And we're really happy that this year we're not going to have to go on bended knee and ask our funders for additional funds for operations. So I appreciate all the hard work that everyone has done. I want to say thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Any other comments? Hey, Paul.
Hi, good evening. My name is Paul Burning. I live at 12 Fieldstone Bay in Hudson, Wisconsin. I'm also the president of the library board. And it seems different from this side speaking to you as now you're the policymaker setting the budget today. I just want to thank you guys for your support of the library. In my opinion, and growing up, libraries were such a key part of myself learning about my grandfather's service in World War II. He died when my father was 10. And we didn't know much about him because his records were classified until the early 2000s. And only then we found out exactly why they were classified, because of the things that he had to do in the war and his role. So libraries were key at one point in time. Because of libraries, I knew every warship that the U.S. built. I knew every type of airplane that they flew, from the Pacific Theater to D-Day, and so I'm a big proponent of libraries. I appreciate any funding that you guys are doing for us in giving us a chance to serve this community and allow people like myself to learn more about not only our community, but in some cases our families. So thank you again. And as policymakers, what you guys decide tonight, we'll work with, and especially with the new board. So thank you for your time, and good luck in budget time.
Thanks, Paul. Any other comments? Any other comments? How about online on Zoom?
I don't know, Mr. Lee, would you like to comment?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. Approve ordinance number 14-23, setting the 2024 budget and levy, approving the 2024 water and sewer utility budgets.
So if the council looks in the packet, we did include the updated summary sheet, which does show that while our total levy amount has not changed, our actual mill rate increase has continued to drop down now that we've got all of our final equalized values for the different properties that are used in that calculation. So as the quick summary, our overall total levy went up 9.16%. This includes our operating expenditure levy. It includes our debt levy, and then also it does include the TID levy, but that doesn't really usually have an effect whatsoever on the mill rate since it washes itself out. So the total levy, as I said, was 9.16%, but the actual impact on mill rate or actual impact on people's property taxes is only 5.51% because the city has continued to have very strong growth. So, with that strong growth, even though our operations and our debt levy are increasing, the actual mill rate increase and the impact on properties is only going 5.51%. So just as an example, if you have a $500,000 property, you would see your city's share of your property taxes go up $119 next year. I also want to just remind the council again that this does include some fairly significant increase in shared revenue from the state of Wisconsin. And that shared revenue increase is going towards being used for salary increases for our public safety personnel as well as all personnel as well. But there are some requirements with using that shared revenue increase, and some of those requirements are being used towards public works for public safety personnel, and that is going towards the new salary study implementation and the pay for those positions in public safety and public works that will be seeing increases. So we'll meet all the statutory requirements for that increase, and we'll also be addressing what our salary study showed as some disparities between ourselves in our pay range and those of our comparable communities. So I guess with all that, I want to thank the department heads and the council and the finance committee and of course the mayor for all their work on helping to get this budget put together. It was a very interesting budget year, considering that we've come off some very low increases and sometimes of honestly very high inflationary increases and things like that. And we knew at some point that we were going to have to start addressing some things in our budgets. And I think this budget addresses a number of key community priorities, which is increased funding for infrastructure, as well as maintaining our level of services that we have, improvements in parks and things like that. So I think it hits a number of those areas as well. And while it is an increase, I think it's a very reasonable one considering what our historical tax levy increases have been over the last few years, especially when you try to compare those with what inflation has been at the same time. So I guess with that, my recommendation is the council to approve the ordinance and the budgets as presented.
Move to adopt ordinance 14-23 of setting the 2024 budget.
Do we have to suspend the rules first?
No, don't say that again. I'm confused on that, right?
It's an ordinance, you suspend the rules.
Move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Joyce, did you make that?
I made the motion, yes.
Okay.
So was there a second to it?
Yes. Mike?
Motion and second to suspend the rules, roll call?
Morissette?
Yes.
Wakefield?
Yes.
Knutson?
No.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Bruck?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Motion's approved, rules are suspended.
So move. Ordinance 14-23.
Second.
Got a motion and second to approve ordinance number 14-23. Discussion. Hearing none, all those,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I was trying to be polite because I've talked a lot. Could I be recognized, Mr.
Oh,
Mayor?
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. I have talked a lot. I will try to keep this brief. Mike is smirking at me. I've talked, obviously, the Finance Committee has discussed this a number of times, so I'd like to summarize a little bit of my comments for you. I, again, also appreciate the work that Aaron Reeves has done, very detailed presentation, explanation. He got all of this information to us early, so we had a lot of time to look at it and discuss it, because it's very complex. Something very big is happening in the city of Hudson this year, and so I'd like to talk about that a little bit. I want to make my first comment, though, is when Aaron presented it to to the Finance Committee in August, he kind of laid it out as 3 separate items. Of course, it is true tonight, we also have the budget from the public utility to consider, but they had approved that themselves. So he laid it out as a debt levy, an operation levy, and then the library issue. And I just want to state, first of all, that I appreciate that we initiated the salary study. We had a very thorough report on that. If anyone has not heard that, they can reference, we had the consultant speaking in August to Finance about how they had evaluated how we paid our staff and looked at our step system for employees to move forward, because it's nice to have something to look forward to in your pay scale. And we had a very short and compressed pay scale. So I just want to state that up front, that I do support that decision. As I understand, for 2003, right now, we have given a 4% cost of living increase for this current year, and that we will also be giving that next year. And in addition to that, at the anniversary date for each employee's hiring date, they will be slid into, with the supervision of the HR department, administration, and their department head, where they fit on the steps. And then they'll know what their future is with the city of Hudson, what steps they can do to go forward and earn more money. And I think that's important. I think it's important that we are competitive in this region to hire and retain excellent employees. So I just wanted to make that comment. And of course, the debt levy is kind of something we're committed to. We voted as a council a year ago on CIP and did a kind of a 2-year plan where we were going to focus on expenditures, and we've already bonded. So clearly that's a part of our commitments. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the operation levy, and I'm just going to try and summarize my thinking about the library. I am supportive of the library. We will always have a library, and I believe we'll always have a good library. I see a lot of the library staff here today, including the director, and they're hardworking and excellent staff. And Joyce brought that up at one meeting. Well, don't the library employees deserve a raise too? They absolutely do. They absolutely do, to be well compensated. And what's interesting, based on the way the state of Wisconsin has established the legislation involving libraries, is we don't determine what is paid. The library board of trustees, everyone knows that, but I'm just stating this for the public, so don't be insulted if I do a recap. The library board of trustees will determine how to spend that increased funding. The point I want to make is, because the joint library is soon to be disbanded, we are obviously going to be funding at a different level. Last year, we contributed $365,000 and change to the library, and then the other partners also contributed their share. In 2024, in other words, and to match next year what's called the exemption level that the county sets for us, we would have to contribute $614,000 and change. Well, this proposal has us actually, which $614,000 is actually a 68% increase. So it's a very significant increase. If anyone wonders if we're giving more money to the library, we have to. I mean, that is what's happening now, is we are going to have to match that exemption rate. But the question is, do we need to go beyond that? Do we need to go higher? And that is my disagreement with this budget, is I don't think that we should, that at this point, with the economic forecasts that we have and the other issues that are on our plate and coming forward, that to jump it up to $745,000 and change is actually a twofold. I mean, excuse me, 100% increase. It's doubling the amount. So I also want to just mention briefly that I was proposing at Finance, didn't get legs there, but I'm going to try one more time. My proposal was that we only levy and contribute to the exempt amount that the county has dictated, and that we also increase the chargebacks to the library. The library has access and uses at least 50% of First Street building. And interesting, again, we have a very detailed budget in front of us. We have the actual numbers of what it costs to operate that First Street building, $208,000 roughly. I feel that we should be charging back, in other words, the library, because in the state of Wisconsin, the libraries are treated as a special and separate entity. That just comes from the respect and desire to protect the libraries in our communities so that every community has one. And I am not in any way trying to say that we wouldn't always have one and that I don't value it, but there's so many other important things on our plate that I feel like we need to fund. And so I am asking that we would include an increased chargeback, that they would pay half of that cost, would be about $104,000. So that would actually shift, instead of having the, Aaron was just giving the summary, I think it was 9.16, if I'm quoting him correctly, total levy increase, it would bring us down around 6% increase. So that was very wordy, but I would like to make that as a second. So I'm going to summarize it by saying that I move that we only contribute the exempt amount to the library, and that we also charge them back for half the cost of operating that building. So that is my second, if it could be, or excuse me, not a second, amendment, meant to say, an amendment to that motion that Randy had made.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend.
That's correct. It was very wordy, but that's my bottom line. Yes, those two things.
Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion? Motion fails on lack of a second. Back to the original motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion's approved. Let's see. Approve the meeting minutes from,
Oh, that's consent.
oh, this consent, yep, okay, consent agenda.
Approve the meeting minutes from October 16, 2023, regular council meeting. Approve the claims in the amount of $958,606.72. Approve renewal of the tax collection agreement with St. Croix County. Approve municipal executive search services agreement with Public Administration Associates. Approve fence easement agreement for 1415 Boulder Court, Robert M. Lips and Michelle L. Lips. Approve fence easement agreement for 1100 Juniper Way, Greg Smits and Sandra Smits. And approve the letter of engagement for SEH for 2024 Vine Street reconstruction and engineering services.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda. Roll call.
Morissette?
Yes.
Wakefield?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Brooke?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Motion's approved, the consent agenda is approved. New business, My Car on Call, additional funding.
Yeah, the next two items are actually kind of tied together a little bit at least. The council approved earlier this year to allocate $30,000 in ARPA funds to be used for the My Car on Call service as sort of our interim transit service as we work through the process to apply for state and federal fundings to implement a full transit service. So the service has been very successful. I'm going to start with that. I've heard very positive things from the facilities that utilize it. I've heard very positive things, including our own facility, that is part of the city. Also, the other ones, I've also heard from many riders that they appreciate it. But we have basically at this point used all the $30,000 allocated. In looking at our kind of monthly averages and what I would think it would be to get us through the end of this year, I would say to be safe, the city would need to allocate an additional $20,000 to continue the service through the end of this year. And kind of how this would dovetail together, I guess, is that our next agenda item, we are talking about the shared ride transit service that, as we know, we thought we'd have up and running this year. The state changed their approval process where we actually had to apply last year in October, pretty much to get going in 2024. So we started this process in 2022, and we thought we'd actually have it up running this year. Unfortunately, because of the process change, and apparently there's not many new services that get started in the state. So it's kind of been a whole new process for a lot of different people involved. But now we have our next agenda item. We will talk about implementing a full transit service next year. So I guess with that said, the main question that I have for the council at this point is, do we want to continue the My Car on Call service through the end of this year? If we do, then what my recommendation would be is to just allocate $20,000 from general fund reserves. As you know, we just did the audit. We have a fairly solid general fund reserve amount of roughly, I believe, 44%. And so we do have the funds available there that could do it. But one thing I want to make sure the council realizes, and I'm sorry, there was supposed to be a spreadsheet attached in the agenda. I didn't realize it wasn't attached, but I did send to the council kind of an updated spreadsheet anyways, I think about a week ago, that shows the unique users and the number of rides given from when we started this service in April through October. I just want to note that we've spent $30,000 to date on this, and we've assisted 77 riders. So, it's a good number of riders. It's not for $30,000. I think the question has to be asked: is the service still worth funding for a small, for kind of a smaller number of riders? I mean, if you do the math on it, we are looking at a fairly high per capita, rider amount over these months. But at the same time, we're also providing a very needed service for people that we have not offered before. So I want the council mostly just to be aware that here's what the numbers are. They've given 1,452 rides to 77 different riders. So far to date, that's cost us about $30,000. They continue to add new riders on a fairly regular basis, and it's been a growing service, that's for sure. So like I said, I just want the council aware of it. I'm not saying that this is not a worthy service to fund. I think that it is. But because we have run through the ARPA funds, at this point, we'd be using general fund reserves through the rest of this year for the $20,000. So I just want the council to, see all the numbers before they kind of make that decision. My recommendation as staff would be to allocate the $20,000 from the general fund reserve to continue it, because riders are now using it regularly. It is looked at as a very needed service at these facilities. And so I would hate to just stop it now before we have something in place to take it to replace it. And that's what we're talking about next, where if the council approves the full transit service on the next agenda item, basically what would happen is if the $20,000 is allocated for the rest of this year, My Car on Call would continue to provide the service through the end of the year, and starting January 1, running would take over as far as a full transit service, which obviously it's a different dispatch and different things like that. But the same service is offered just in a different way from a different provider starting then in January 1. And I do note in the sheet that we don't have the funds right now to continue both services. And my hope would be that the full transit service that would start next year would be able to, provide this service on top of the full transit to anyone that wants to use it, not just limited to those in these certain facilities. So I think that's kind of the summary of where we're at with this item. And I guess this looking for council direction if they wish to allocate general fund reserve dollars to continue the service through the end of the year.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Discussion?
I've got a friend who works at one of the senior living facilities as a receptionist, and she said how grateful they are for having this service, and so I think that it's really worthwhile. I mean, it's going to be limited to the next 2 months, and then we'll be changing things up, so I think it's worth investing.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Approval of shared ride transit system bid for 2024 implementation.
So this, as I just talked about, is what we've been working on for a number of years now. And I want to let the council know that Edwin is on from the West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, who has been our basically the consultant that we have used to go through this whole process. It's wildly complicated, and there's no way that our staff would have the ability to kind of get through all this on our own. So Edwin has been helping us through, and the Regional Planning Commission has been helping us through from the initial study to the updated study to the application process to the bidding process, all those sort of things. So so we've been utilizing them as a way to get us to kind of this point, basically. And so what I'll do is kind of just run through quickly. We followed the whole state federal procurement process to do this. We issued the RFP. We received one response. We're not surprised by the fact that we received one because there are a very limited number of providers that do this service. It'll be the same provider that offers the service in Richmond and River Falls. And so with that, with their bid price, our estimated share of our share of the total cost of service will be about $93,000. Now, this doesn't include, I note this in the memo, administrative services. I have in there that it could possibly be an additional $40,000, but we really hope to bring that down significantly because what we're doing is talking to River Falls and New Richmond about the fact that we're all doing the same thing with the same provider, providing the same reports to the same agencies, that we are going to try to consolidate, have one staff person from probably River Falls do all this, and then we'd be hoping that we would just be have some sort of agreement with them to do the reports and things like that. So we're trying to work through that side of things right now. I wanted just to make the council aware that we probably will have some sort of administrative expense with this. And the other part of the reason for that up front is that we've never done this before. And from talking with the state, it sounds like not many places have started new ones in the recent years. So we're just not sure exactly what the staff time is. If we get into this and we realize that maybe it's not as bad as we thought, we'll be able to pivot and we'll be able to assign duties to internal staff, existing city staff, that we can do this. But I wanted to make note that we're just a little unsure right now of what the workload looks like administratively for this. So I wanted to put that number in there so we're just aware that potentially we could have to come up with some additional funds to kind of help cover this if that administrative cost is something that we have to utilize at some point. We're just, like I said, we're not 100% sure yet, and we're trying to work through that. I gave a worst case scenario number in the council packet, just because I don't want any surprises if it gets that bad, but I don't think it will. I think we'll definitely be able to come in under that amount fairly significantly. So with that said, we had allocated $91,000 in ARPA funds to cover the first year service. So we're pretty close. We allocated 91, the bid came in at 93. The only thing that we will have to be probably addressed is once we determine what that administrative cost is, we may have to figure out just a little bit of gap funding to be able to cover that amount. And again, I think that's something that we would take a look at, either something from general fund reserves or, usually with our budget through the course of the year, we have savings in other areas. And just off the top of your head, you're not going to be paying for a city administrator for probably the first at least 3 to 4 months of the year. So you'll have some savings there that might be able to utilize for something like this. So I'm not overly worried about that amount. I think you'll be able to allocate whatever that number turns out to be for admin to cover whatever small shortfall there might be. In addition, there could be that some of our ARPA projects come in under budget, or we don't decide to utilize some of the ARPA funds that's already allocated that we could also use too. So I think there's additional funding. The additional funding for the admin side should not be any sort of deterrent to moving forward. But with all that, we need the council approval to kind of move forward, with the process. And so, as a reminder, this is a full shared ride transit system that's operated by a third-party vendor. I provided links to both the River Falls and New Richmond examples of what they do. So, it will basically be doing pretty much the exact same thing. We'll be providing the service within the city and within a 5-mile radius outside the city. I should also note that because we're implementing the service, the county will be providing some funds to assist the city with this. It's going to be less than $10,000, but at least there will be some county funding coming in as well. And then one other thing to look at, which is probably something that's going to be in the future, because between us, River Falls and New Richmond, we all have a little bit different renewal dates with our contracts right now. But our goal is that we're going to try to coordinate our renewal dates moving forward so that we can go out together as one bid for all 3 communities. If we can work that out, if we get all the councils to sign off on it, if all those things can occur, we'd like to look at trying to go forward after this year's implementation at some point to do a joint bid with the other 2 communities that have the same service, because our hope would be is that we might be able to get a little bit more economy of scale, a better, maybe even more bids, because we'll be a larger system. So we might be able to find more providers that would be willing to at least submit responses to proposal, things like that. But again, that's something that's going to be for future years. I think basically right now, what we're looking at is, does the council want to move forward with this in 2024? The goal would be, it's a tight time frame, but that's what our bid document said, is that it should be up and running in January. I know that is very tight, but that's what our proposal called for, and that's what the response says will happen. And then the other thing to definitely note is that after 2024, if the council determines they want to continue the service, whatever that amount is for the service, at this point, the $93,000 plus potentially any administrative costs would have to come from the tax levy. There won't be additional ARPA funds or one-time funds to use for ongoing operations. So I guess with that, I'm here to answer questions, although honestly, it'll probably be referred to Edwin if there actually are any questions about the service. And if you wish to proceed, we just need a motion approving the bid from Running Inc. Transit Services.
Joy.
Thank you. Excuse me. I know you can't see me, Aaron. Thank you for the report, and I appreciate that Edwin's online also tonight. I just want to get this on the table initially, and then we can talk about the whole concept. But my concern is that we already voted as a council to allocate those ARPA funds to public works street maintenance projects. That was, I'm referencing the minutes from the January 3rd meeting, where basically it was announced that, we've spent it on various things, lots of public safety decisions, parks is having a major. And so that decision was made, motion by Alderperson District 1, Randy Morissette, seconded by Lynn Wakefield, I'm on the wrong page, no. The remaining funds of the ARPA to direct staff to prepare options to use remaining funds for street projects. And that was carried unanimously. And the only thing that we have done as a committee so far is to allocate the purchase of some traffic control devices that seem to be kind of urgently needed in the city. And so the rest of it had not been allocated yet. And so I don't know what the procedures are for that. I'm not saying that this isn't valid. I am concerned. I mentioned that once before when we talked about ARPA funds, that as you look throughout the state, lots of communities got like free money, yippee, it's coming in as a result of the COVID lockdowns and the drag on the economy that many cities have experienced. And a lot of cities initiated new programs and stood up new projects that need ongoing money, ongoing support with that ARPA funding. And they were running into trouble because, maybe their levy capacity can't handle it the next year. So they've started something really important. So I have commented on that once before, that I was appreciating that the city had made decisions to purchase, certain monitoring equipment, things that are really helping the police department, et cetera. The one-time installation of the splash pad that's going to be up at White Camp Park. So that is what that is the trend we had been following. And this has been allocated for street maintenance. Again, we can go back and watch the videotape, yay River Channels. But again, that had been already allocated, so I don't know what the steps would be if the council needs to undo it, but I just wanted to throw that out there tonight, that we do need to take that into consideration. I know there is a deadline, I think in 2024. I had consulted with the Public Works Director a little bit about what else we might do going forward, and that there was still a window of time, but it does need to be spent by a certain time period, as many grants are required. So again, just wanted to put that out there for the discussion before we go forward into other aspects of it. Thank you.
Yep, and that is correct. I mean, we had roughly $100,000 in unallocated ARPA funds at the time, at the spring, I believe, at some point, whatever that meeting date was. We did have the council direct to use that for public works sort of things. What changed since then is that initially, when we started the budget process, I assumed, based on what historically some other communities have been doing, our share of the shared ride transit would be like in the $40,000 range. And then as we started seeing what was coming forward due to inflation and things like that, and it started to look like it was gonna be closer to 100,000. That's when I did talk with Mike Mraz about, let's not start allocating the use of this money until we know for sure where this ARPA will come in, or where the transit will come in at, because it is a pretty big number. And we knew what that, well, as we saw with the budget we just approved, we already were looking at a fairly significant levy increase, attacking another $100,000 on that. I wanted to wait and see where this came in at, and it did come in closer to the $100,000, the $93,000. So, at this point, that 91,000, while the council had said, yes, we will utilize for public works sort of things, what this recommendation is, because the number is higher than anticipated, it's significantly higher than anticipated when we started this process, that we use it for the first year operations. And I did want to make sure that I tried to make it clear when I kind of summarized all this, is that after the first year, the council will have to budget and levy for the continued operations of the shared ride transit system if they wish to continue, because there will be no other one-time funds to use.
Okay.
I'd be fine keeping that 91 in there and then using, what was what did we approve for the street projects from that TARPA funds? What was the amount?
100 something.
Let's see.
You want to address that?
Yeah, I'll just comment
Ross?
on
Thank
it.
you.
I know the one that comes off the top of my head is the Public Works Committee and staff were looking at downtown APS systems at Vine Street, Walnut Street, which are help people with visual impairments cross the street safely. So that was kind of the thing that we were working on. We actually went out for RFP to get bids and ran into some issues getting contractors to come in and do that work at this time. So that was kind of the big project that we were looking at doing, and it fell within that $100,000 range. So that's the one that we were looking at.
Well, that would certainly do that, and I would be okay pulling out of the general fund for the rest of the projects, or wherever we land with this transit piece. I kind of am a little cautious about starting this up too, next year, just to see where things, 77 people riders.
Can I comment real quick when you talk about that APS system? I still have that in here. So our use of ARPA funds, the remaining 91,000 that I say that I would like to see allocated to the shared ride transit, that does not include the $100,000 for the APS. That's still in there. Our assumption was we couldn't get the work done this year, we'd do it next year, which is still well within time frame to use the ARPA funds. So it's not an either or between that APS system and using it for shared ride taxi at all. The APS is in there. We still have the 91,000 left. It's just that what we had said was with that unallocated funds, we'd use it towards public works sort of projects. And we did, like the APS system. We did, I think, traffic speed signs. We did street markings. We've used some of that because I believe we had about $326,000 in unallocated funds, somewhere roughly in that area. So we used a lot of those for certain other public works projects as it came up. But when it got down towards the end here, that's when I told Mike not to bring forward anything else until we saw where this bid came in. So, I guess what I'm saying is that we have utilized it towards public works things. It's just the last 91,000 I put a stop to once it looked like maybe we might need it for this. because it's a much higher number than anticipated. So I want to make sure, technically, yes, we could still use this 91,000 towards other public works things as they come up, and that's fine. But we don't have to not do some of the things. Anything that's been approved already is already in the allocations for the ARPA. This is just the last unallocated portion is this 91,000.
Well, my main point was we can subsidize that through the general fund if you have other projects that need to get done and that the Public Works Committee may have. I think that's important too, and then we can subsidize it with the general fund.
Could you clarify what you mean by the general fund, Randy? Because I don't know all those reserves you might be referring to.
The 45, what'd you say, 44 now?
43% general fund reserve, so we could allocate it out of that. And then also we have our capital improvement funds, where we have some unallocated funds within that we could also use. And those capital funds are where we have bonded for projects, and then over the years, projects come in under budget, we reallocate things, stuff like that. So we also have funds in our capital project fund that could be utilized as well for this, $91,000 kind of left. That would not be an issue if Public Works had other things that came up that needed to be done in the short term.
So it would be used for
possibly have
fixed
been done with this
asset,
money.
be fixed, and then instead of, this new program which is going to be operational every year, impacted every year. So your projects get done, is what I'm trying to get at. Funded, I should say.
Yep. And I do want to stress, Councilmember Knutson's completely accurate. While we're not committing to having to do this every year, we are going through a process to implement a fairly substantial system. And so, if the council's unsure they want to continue with something like this, that's understandable. While it's not that we're contractually locked in for a long-term period of time, but we are still going through the process of implementing a system, putting it in place, getting it up and running, with the general expectation that it will continue after the first year. And if that is the case, and if you use the ARPA funds for the first year, then you are looking at having to increase that tax levy in future years to continue to provide the service. Now, we, as of right now, are still in a very good shape with our levy limit capacity. So we have capacity to be able to add an additional $100,000 to the levy in future years to continue this service. But that, obviously has to go into the discussion with all the other budget requests that will come in for 2025, any other things that, kind of may change, things like that. So Councilmember Knutson is very accurate that this will have, a direct tax levy impact after the first year of operation that will have to be included in future years' budgets.
Well, this is important to the community to have the shared ride service and this isn't going to only be for the senior centers. This is going to be for everyone who needs a ride around the city. So it could be used for people going to appointments or going downtown shopping. The business community has been asking for a shared ride taxi for a long time to get workers to jobs, things like that. So I will make the motion to approve.
And I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve. Discussion?
I just think we need to be cautious. We did increase, we did increase our levy, as Joy had pointed out. We increased funding for the library. We have to be cautious and fiduciaries when it's coming to what the market is saying as we move into an election year as well. Things are going to get a little hairy, so we got to tiptoe through the tulips with our spending, So I'm cautious. I'm not saying no, but and I'm hoping it would come in lower. But we're coming to our max in my head.
And what we initially, when it was proposed, it has become much more than that we need additional funding. So if that trend continues, then we can expect that even what's budgeted for 2024 could end up requiring more.
Us going back to the
Going back
levy
to
increase.
levy, doing
And then
that.
there's only so many times we could, not to interrupt you, sorry, go back to the taxpayers and say, hey, they're gonna say, that's enough, you're out of here. You raised
And can you
taxes.
clarify how long this price is locked in for?
I'm sorry.
1 second. I was asking Edwin, hold on, if he could clarify how long this price is locked in for.
Yes, it's the per hour rate that the provider would charge to the city is locked in for a year. And then there's 4 option years after that that the city could take advantage of. Those option years would be the hourly rate would be adjusted by the consumer price index for urban areas in August for the last 12 months. So that's the standard for the state. And this last year, the CPIU was significantly lower than it had been the year before. And I think that's one of the things that we saw this number come in a little bit heavier was because of the inflation that was seen 2 years ago in the consumer price index. The expectation is that we've seen the worst of that, most of that caused by COVID and supply chain challenges, and then demand for drivers. The cost for drivers has gone up significantly. But this, the per hourly rate would be locked in specifically for a year, and then out years would be controlled by the CPIU.
So, Edwin, when you talk about the CPI, you said for cities, so we would be lumped in with what, all the major cities in the state of Wisconsin, or is it metro, or?
The CPIU is it's a national measure that's done by the Bureau of Labor Management, I believe, and it measures non-rural cost consumer price adjustments.
Okay. So we would be lumped in with all the major cities, not just in Wisconsin, but the country.
Yep, it's a federal number.
Yes.
Well, I know what the CPI, but it made it sound like it was going to be more localized. One other question, Edwin, is, or Aaron, when you had talked about the 5-mile radius, does that mean that rides can originate from outside the city, or just that any ride that originates from within the city can go out 5 miles?
One end of the trip needs to either originate or end in the city. And the reason cities usually do that is because they view the outlying areas, people coming in to shop or go to medical or go to school or work, is to the advantage of the city. There's a base rate for each individual fare, and then if it's outside the city, there's a surcharge per mile outside the city. So the people that have trips that either begin or end outside the city would be paying a higher passenger fare.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a, not to kind of rewind, but this year, the on-call service, provided the much needed service. We all saw the growth of it and the thank you notes and things like that. This is a completely different package we're looking at for next year, right? I mean, it's only going to grow the client base. I'm all for the service, and I'm glad that we were able to provide that. Where I get stuck is this kind of blank check, maybe not for next year, even though we still don't know, but for upcoming years, and we're going to burden future taxpayers with something. I don't really see us starting this and then pulling the rug out from it because we just decided 1 year didn't work. I mean, this is something a city does and commits to. But if you run the numbers at some point, it might even be cheaper to offer everyone free, Uber cards. If you run the numbers that don't have any control, in a couple of years we might be a public transportation company. So even though we have ARPA funds this year, to commit ourselves, this isn't just thinking about 2024. This is thinking even deeper to that. I think we've all committed to providing to the the senior living centers and the economically challenged people, when it comes to providing rides. I think we've done a good job with that, but I don't want this to become a blank check program that we sign off on.
So if we didn't approve this, are you saying that we should continue with the My Car on Call service?
I'm throwing that out there as a question. Financially, a real basic numbers, it makes, it's half the price.
Except that, well, we're only paying for half the year, this year with $50,000, so.
April,
It would have been
through
April,
December, so.
April through the end of the year
Oh,
would be
April
about
through,
yeah.
50,000. So, I mean,
Initially-
if you try to do the math out, you would, I definitely think My Car on Call would be cheaper. But, again, it's just full service versus a more specific clientele. But, you're completely right that this is, while not technically committing, as I said, before, the anticipation is if you start this, you're probably going to continue it. And, by doing so, you are adding this additional number to the future levies. And while it's controlled by, CPI, at this point, when that renewal does come up, that all goes out the window, which is where, we were originally anticipating $40,000 for this service. And then when the renewal started coming in, as Edwin said, kind of post-COVID and issues with supply chain and issues with getting drivers and things like that, I mean, it doubled, it more than doubled of what was kind of anticipated. So you don't know for sure. Now the council will always have the option to opt out, but as everyone said, you sort of don't see doing this and then stopping it right away, probably being very feasible to do.
If I could just add, I do believe we have an aging population in Hudson, so I think the need is there. I only think it's going to continue. But Mr. Mayor, I know that this was something that was really important to you. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to weigh in on your thoughts on this.
You're right. I've supported a transit system here for some time. And listening to what we're hearing tonight, though, this is going a little bit beyond what the scope of what we had been initially discussing and proposing and hopefully implementing here. I'm a little bit nervous about the cost of this, especially with and the usage coming up with rides that might originate outside the city with non-residents. That concerns me. Obviously, the costs, ongoing costs, operational costs that we commit to for the future are very, very concerning to me. As well as I think that there was a discussion where it was mentioned that we might be able to work with the surrounding communities that have the same program and try to get some scale of efficiency with this. That I think is something that should be explored. So
Sounds like I'm sorry.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, one quick question before I turn it back to you, Councilmember Morissette. Is there a way to put parameters on it so it could only originate from Hudson, so that if you have to live here to use this?
That's a question for Edwin, probably, given that we're getting money coming, potential federal money coming. I don't know that we would be able to amend that.
Yes, is the short answer. I don't think that's a large enough change in the parameters for the bid document that WisDOT would have any issues with changing that. And the hours that you run and the maximum hours that the contractor can charge is also a variable. So if there's what are considered significant, and that's a very vague term, it's difficult to know beforehand before you go and ask WisDOT if it's a significant change. But if you're making changes that are not considered significant, the city can make those changes arbitrarily. You could also, in future years, limit the hours of service. So, yes. And just to be clear, the 5 mile radius it excludes anything in the state of Minnesota. So that hadn't been asked, but that's a question that comes up a lot of times when you're talking about these service envelopes. And it specifically excludes going over into Minnesota.
Edwin, could we this year tighten up the hours then? Or I heard you say the following year, so is it too late in the process to tighten up the hours this time?
I don't think so, but I would have to check with WisDOT because it's not always clear to me what will and won't be acceptable on their side.
Well, and is that an option, like you had mentioned, or we had both mentioned, of My Car On Call being a vendor in 2024? Do I trust that?
I'm Kurt Miller, founder of My Car On Call.
That would have to be not through this program. So basically, for what My Car On Call does, because they can't provide the service to everyone, then we're not eligible to apply and get, the federal funding and things like that. Because I guess, Edwin, what's the total cost of service? Our share is $93,000 as a city if we want to do it. What was the total? Do we have a total cost of service of what's anticipated?
We do. I don't have that in front of me. I think it was around 400,000, maybe a little bit over 400,000 for the entire service. And then there was state and federal grants and then the fare revenue from the passengers that brought that down to the 93,000.
Right. And just so basically, because we're doing we have to do a more robust full service to be eligible for those other funds. But the flip side of that is then, we have to, pay our share of whatever that number is. I mean, when we first started this conversation, and the mayor is very right, I mean, in 2021, I'm looking back at, or 2020 and 2021, looking back at my notes, I mean, River Falls and New Richmond were, they were budgeting $20,000 for their share, of the service and things like that. So things have obviously changed dramatically, since that time when we first started this process. And so that is one of the main reasons why we're having this conversation tonight, is that these numbers came in. And while we anticipated they would definitely be higher because of inflation and things like that, the council just needs to understand where they are and what those numbers are. And so, to answer Councilmember Kennedy's question, we can stay with My Car On Call. It'll provide the same services, and we can allocate a fixed amount for it. So we can say that there's, $75,000 to get you through the year. And so for that number, we'll allocate that for next year. And then if for whatever reason, at a certain point, they get close to that, maxing that number out, we'd have to come back to the council to see if they're interested in allocating more. So it is an option to continue with share with the My Car On Call. But in doing that, just because of numbers, we can't afford to do both. There's really no way, and it does get also redundant if we do the full program through with the state and federal funding for that amount. So,
Aaron, if I may make a comment on that 20,000 number that you were seeing through River Falls, that was actually overfunding from the state well above their historic funding percentages. And that was based on ARPA money that the state had. And so it was a little bit misleading for 2 or 3 years there that the cities were paying as little as they were, but that was actually ARPA money that came through the state through the state funding.
How much will New Richmond and River Falls be paying for their services for next year? Do you know?
I don't. They were not in the same bidding cycle, so they might be locked into a much lower, well, not much lower, but somewhat lower rate. It will have been adjusted by the CPIU over the last 2 years to increase it significantly above what it was. But I believe I checked with, I believe they are in their 3rd and 4th year of their 5-year contracts, just off the top of my head. But they were not, as Aaron pointed out, they're not on the same cycle. And so they were locked in to a rate during a period of time when it was easier to run those operations. And I know that some of the providers out there are struggling with the rates that they have contracts with the cities right now to find adequate numbers of drivers.
So couple points, and I know there's a motion on the floor.
Just 1 second, okay? Is there anything else you'd like to add here that hasn't been covered?
I just wanted to add, a question was asked when we were coming in and we were chatting.
Again, identify yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm Kurt Miller with My Car on Call, founder of My Car, and we're very interested in continuing at whatever capacity makes sense for the city, and we haven't really expressed that. And there are ways that we can mitigate and handle the budgets based on what's available from the city as far as rides and impact that we make. So I just we're very interested in fitting in where it fits in for the city.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure you got heard there.
Just,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
yeah, understanding that, 2 points. There's a reason other cities aren't developing this. Maybe it's a pause for us to think, well, maybe they can't afford it. They're getting rid of stuff that aren't fiduciary, making any money or whatever you want to call it. Second point is, knowing there's a motion on the floor, if we postpone this so we get more information, is it going to screw up the application or the start? If we postpone. And I'm saying that to you instead of throwing out, I move the table, to try to work together on it, instead of doing Robert Rules of Order on you.
Okay.
I think it needs to be talked out more. Obviously, there's some things that all of us have questions.
Well, to your point, Aaron, is this time sensitive? Can we get a little more information and come back at our next meeting? Or when does a decision need to be made on this to move forward or not?
I think Edwin can answer that better. It's been a weird process because we tried to do all of our stuff and then we had to wait forever for the state to actually accept us being able to do it and give us the okay. And then all of a sudden it gets really fast. Because I think we really couldn't do anything till like October, because that was when the state gives the okay to move forward for next year. And then we have this very compressed time frame. So Edwin, I don't know when do we have to officially either approve or deny?
I don't know. Once again, that would be a question for WisDOT. The original RFP had a November 21st issue of the notice to proceed that would be if the city were to approve it, then that would go out at the end of this month to the vendor. And but the contract start date in the RFP is estimated. And so there is some wiggle room in there. Everything after the due dates for submitting the bids is listed as estimated. So there's definitely some wiggle room in there. I don't know what impact that would have on funding, and I don't know if it would allow the vendor, I don't know what the impact on the vendor options would be for that.
Yeah, okay. So, it seems to me that the worst case scenario is if we were to take our time, take a look at this for the next meeting, and if we run up against the deadline, which sounds like we have a day after the next meeting, and we don't get an application in that time, we go with the status quo for a year, right? And it buys us more time to look at it.
I will say that the process of getting the procurement done is convoluted, and that is money that the city spent in a contract with the RPC this year, and you'd need to allocate resources to have the whole procurement process done again, which is not to say that I'm not trying to rush anybody into anything. I'm just trying to make you aware of, if you were to delay it and have to go through a new procurement process, there's a fair amount of paperwork that would be required to get that done.
All right. Paperwork is going to have to be done no matter what anyway. What was the cost?
For everything, here we go. It was a maximum of $15,000.
And have we spent that already?
I don't know. No, we haven't yet. Last time I saw an accounting on that was probably 2 weeks ago, and I think we were down to $2,000 or $3,000. Now, that's a cost cap. we would go ahead and provide the services under the RPC's rural budget.
I didn't understand
if
what
we
that
missed that.
means. We're down to 2,000 or 3,000. That means that what we've spent, what we owe, what?
Left. That would have been around $12,000 or $13,000 that would have been billable hours so far.
Yep, because that was the cost to prepare for the application process. But now that we've done it, if for some reason we didn't do it next year and we decided we wanted to do it starting in 2025, hopefully we've got a lot of the some of the groundwork laid, things like that. But we would have to work with the WCWRPC to do another agreement with it. But I definitely don't want, because we've gone this far, staff is not trying to put the council in the corner here that you have to approve something. It's just the timing that we have to work with under this procurement process. We knew this would be a conversation to have with the council because we've never done this before. We had to see what it looked like. We didn't know what our costs would be until the bids came in. We didn't know, where we would end up at until all this process was through. So now that we know, and we literally just did the bid opening, we did the required review of the bids, all those sort of things. So this was the next available meeting where we could talk about it. But I don't want the council to ever feel forced or in a corner on a decision like this, because it is a big decision. You're starting a whole new service provided by the city. And so, if you need more time to either think about it, have specific questions answered, whatever it is, then I encourage you to do that. Because as the mayor said, if for some reason we miss the deadline, we can't do it, we have to, basically deny the bid for 2024. My car and call has just stepped forward again to say they will continue their service in any way that the city would like, for next year, which would still at least cover, probably some of our more needed transit services in the community, but it's not the full service that this one is. So, it is definitely a council decision on how to move it forward, and that's why we wanted to give the council the chance to have this conversation, because it is a higher number. I was looking back at my notes again, and basically, I'm not sure exactly where River Falls and New Richmond are at, but it looks like they were, looking at like in 2021, 2022 budgets around 40,000, which is what we anticipated when we initially started this whole process. And clearly things have changed, fairly significantly since then.
So Aaron, if you could, it's in talking with Mike here, he's saying that our next council meeting is the 20th, but the deadline is the 21st. Is that right?
It's not a hard deadline. That's an estimated deadline.
So how much time does it take to complete the process if we were to vote favorably on this on the 20th?
We could, let's see, we would issue the notice to proceed. The contract would have to be drawn up, and that's not part of that, so that would be on the city attorney. It's fairly straightforward. You just incorporate all of the provisions of the RPC into that. We have an example from Chippewa Falls that could be followed there. And there'd have to be some small negotiation, I imagine, with the provider because if you went any later than that, it would probably be very difficult for them to guarantee that they could start on January 1st. And then at that point in time, as I said earlier, we'd have to go back to WisDOT and find out how much wiggle room could be in that before it would invalidate the procurement process.
And just hypothetically, if we couldn't start on the 1st because we were running afoul of the deadline, what would be a projected start date?
The city could propose anything it wanted, and that would have to be agreeable with provider. I would not imagine that they would be difficult to deal with on a situation like that, because they would want the business to start as soon as possible. But if the city wasn't able to do that, I would imagine, would rather give the city the time and hope that the business still came in rather than terminate that. I'd see WisDOT's parameters being more of an issue than it would be with the vendor.
All right, and then of course another option is to have a special meeting next week.
Well, and I was just, If we wanted to do a public hearing, that's 30-day notice, so that does not work in this time frame. Okay. So if this is on the agenda, this next meeting, people can't comment on it during open comment, or can we make an exception for an agenda item?
You could list it as a public hearing.
Yeah,
You can allow comment.
30 days.
That's, when you talk about a public hearing with a 30-day requirement, that's more of a zoning concept. If you
Okay.
wanted to allow comment, that's certainly within the purview of the mayor and the council, if the council wanted to allow comment on a more expedited basis.
I would encourage us to consider that, to get feedback from our residents on this.
Okay. All right, so what's your pleasure? You guys had a chance to think about your motion?
So Randy, you're asking me to withdraw my motion and ask that we move this to the next meeting?
Yeah.
I will do that.
You do that?
I'm doing that, yes.
Okay. So we got that, so we'll postpone the issue until the motion is withdrawn, okay, with the seconder, and then we will postpone this discussion until the next meeting.
And it will be available for people to comment on?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So just so everybody heard that, we will make a period available for people to comment on this before it comes up.
Thanks, Joy.
All right, everybody good on that?
In the interim, if there's specific questions that the council might have, if they could email me those before the meeting, it would be good, so then we can make sure we're prepared. If you think of anything specific that you might have concerns about, questions about, anything like that, prior to the next meeting, if you could shoot me the email, then I can at least work with Edwin to have answers for you at the meeting, at the hearing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I will talk to WisDOT and try and spec out what the parameters for changing starting dates and or modifying service hours or something like that.
Okay, thanks, Edwin.
You bet.
All right, 11th Street traffic study discussion.
We don't
Traffic
have to-
safety.
Do we need to vote on
No, we're just.
a motion in a
post-
second?
No,
Just postponing. Thank you, sorry.
there's no motion in front of us. Okay, 11th Street traffic safety discussion.
So I apologize for any miscommunications that occurred through this whole process. So as you can see in the agenda packet, what the recommendations were coming out of the Public Safety Committee for this area, the cost is minimal. We can do all this work installed for probably less than $2,000. So we can use existing budgeted funds. We're not talking about, some big number that we have to try to come up with from somewhere else. So my recommendation at this point would just be to use existing funds that we would have left over from some other project within the budget this year, because it is such a minimal amount to do the work, to get the work done as soon as possible. Now, some things obviously with repainting and stuff may have to wait, unfortunately, but we will do them if we can. But we can definitely do the other recommended work as soon as feasible as well.
Okay, anybody?
I'd like to make a couple of comments. Thank you. This is an issue that's affecting residents in my district, just so everyone knows, for the public, that we're talking about 11th Street South, running basically from Wisconsin Street south to Cooley at the intersection. So it's from where the cemetery is down to Willow River Cemetery, down to like the Taco John's interchange there, right by the Hagen Bridge. So that is an area, a long-standing neighborhood in Hudson. When I first moved here, O'Connell's Funeral Home was actually a trucking depot for Valley Cartage. So, major trucks coming in and out of there. In talking to local residents, I heard the story that Mr. Gilbert actually donated the land for EP Rock for $1, charged $1 to the school district because we needed a new school. So it was kind of on the edge of town, and in those days, sidewalks weren't put in for whatever reason. Smaller number of residents, less traffic, etc. Well, the city of Hudson has certainly grown up a lot, and 11th Street has become, I don't know what the word's going to be, collector, maybe? Not sure. Is that right, Mike? Thank you. Looking to the Public Works Director. So it's a pretty busy street now, and there is no sidewalk. So that is very a big concern for the residents because there's a lot of children there. There are homes where a lot of families that are new to Hudson or just starting their family own a home there, and that's one of the nice things. It's very walkable to the school district. I actually provided you with some information today that came by email that shows that at EP Rock, there's up to 170 children walking to school every day. Now, they may come from a different direction than the west side there along 11th Street, but it's definitely an area where people would like their children to walk to school if they felt safe, and that has become a difficult issue. So the neighbors have really collaborated and worked together to help each other with this. If you drive down that stretch of road, you'll see lots of signs that say slow down, please slow down. You know, they're little yard signs that they're putting up. And our police department has been very responsive in running traffic studies and reporting those studies, setting up the flashing light monitors so that people know what speed they're traveling as they go down that stretch. And there's times when you might go on 11th Street and there's hardly a car out there. But when school's out at the high school or people are heading to the freeway to commute to work, there's a lot of traffic there. So there can be issues. Now, we all know, and I certainly defer to the expert of the public safety and law enforcement, that signs don't always change behavior. People don't always respond to that. Flashing school signs may be helpful, but we're looking at budget constraints. And also, we're excited about the fact that this stretch of road will get a reconstruction next, 2 years. 25. Right, I know it. I keep wanting it to be in 2024. Frustrating. It's to be designed in the next 12 months and then implemented the following summer. So we're looking at 2 years out for some of that sense of more safety and a sidewalk to walk on for the family. Last night I was coming home from an errand. I thought, I'm just going to drive down 11th Street. It's pretty dark, occasional street lights. I'm going 20, I think, and all of a sudden I see a family of 5 walking in the painted walkway. And there was an adult there, and the kids were probably 3rd grade and up, something like that. They weren't small. They were staying within the line. Of course, I didn't see them to the very last moment, but they were walking, in the only provided space. And that is, if those of you don't know, it's on the east side of the street. So that has been a concern. The neighbors had come to the Public Safety Committee this spring in April and requested a specific item, which was a stop sign at the corner of Morrison and 12th Street. And Public Safety agreed to that request because it was actually an unsigned intersection. It was, small little neighborhood street. You're supposed to look both ways. And what were the rules when we had drivers that yield to the right? Is that? I don't know. Anyway, they were requesting a stop sign, so there wasn't a question for the drivers. And so that was granted, and I believe that was put on the council agenda within a couple weeks. It was on the May council agenda after the April public safety meeting and approved and promptly installed. So part of the concern, and I think it's just a good discussion that we can have as council members, because we're waiting and looking forward to the development of the traffic control policy, in which we'll have more laid out plans. So I'm going to accept some blame for the fact that the members of the Public Safety Committee actually thought that Public Works was going to discuss the items that they approved in August. And if I read your agenda, I attended the meeting, I've watched it on River Channels twice, but I didn't read the minutes that were then provided the next month. And the minutes did indicate, if I had seen that, I would have realized, they're expecting our committee, Public Works, to take it up. And I certainly did not understand that, and maybe the process would have been smoother if I hadn't been present. I did go to that meeting in August because I knew, there were probably 10 or 12 residents there, including young elementary students that came to the podium to speak about their neighborhood. And I wanted to be there to support them and hear responses. And I was invited by the chair of public safety to come to the podium, and I did so. And basically what I was commenting on is that Public Works Committee was about to take up the issue of purchasing more traffic control devices. And, we had just published that agenda that afternoon, on a Thursday afternoon for the following Monday. And so that is what I intended to communicate to them, because the residents were asking for permanent flashing signs, speed humps, delineators to mark the walking path. A lot of things, as Aaron Reeves just mentioned, are more expensive and we probably can't provide right now, and the residents understand that. I think they do, and they know that they're going to be part of the design process when their street is reconstructed to be a safer mode of transport for driving and walking and pedestrian and bike use. So again, that I think there it slipped through the cracks, and I'll certainly take blame or credit for some of that because I did not intend. I didn't expect that things like painting the crosswalk would be something that we would have to advise on. And so I felt that this was kind of, and that's where I would like to get better understanding. I did provide to you all at your desk tonight, I feel like a school teacher every time I was a school teacher once actually, handouts about the committee roles. And I have brought this up to you, Mr. Mayor, before about the policy that is actually indicated in our ordinances about having a committee report. Now, a lot of times the committee report might in fact be items that are forwarded and they're on the agenda, consent agenda often, that have been decided. A lot of times the actions that we take in Public Works are a 3-page document with engineering plans and costs laid out, and you know, our staff gets that on the agenda for the next council to determine. So I just think that we should have more communication about how we address that going forward. For example, I think recently Public Safety had an in-depth discussion, was brought forward from some of our EMS provider and our fire chief with concerns about access on the streets in winter months when there was a lot of snow. And they were discussing the possibility of at Public Safety, discussing with that professional staff, should we implement an alternate day system for parking in the winter in Hudson. And so at that time, that was a possibility, and that perked my ears up that might come to the Public Works Committee, which I do chair. But as it turned out, they went a different direction. We've all approved an ordinance change instead, rather than requiring that shifting of parking alternate sides. A different option went forward, and again, that didn't come to Public Works, it just came to the council. Because, I mean, it seems to me as I read our ordinances as laid out, and it doesn't mean that they can't be different these days, but we should look at them and be mindful that any action that's taken at the committee level should be reported. So sometimes I sort of feel like we should report, well, we talked about something, we didn't take action on it, because that helps bring the rest of the council members up to speed of what the other committee is doing. So there's only 2 major committees there, and I also want to try not to have what I'd call mission creep, where Public Works starts to try to oversee. It is true, decisions that might be made by Public Safety to provide enhancements or devices do cost money and can come out of the Public Works Department. And I do want to, be cautious of that, so we're sure that we can be operational throughout all 12 months of the year and not, spend too much money on some of those devices. So as we move forward with the traffic control policy, I wonder if we should think about having a fund set aside that we know that could be used. So Public Safety, if they feel strongly that we've got a problem in this area, they could vote for something. It could come to council could approve it, and we would know it would come out of that fund. So just an idea for going forward, and I'll cede the floor to anyone else who wants to comment. Thank you.
I'll comment a little bit. Just a little history, Joy. In the past, councils before you and committee chairs of each prospective committee kind of always poo-pooed the public safety because we were always spending their budget money. And that's where we kind of, in the spirit of trying to work with the Public Works, said, well, we should kick these back up to there so we're not spending the budget that Mike doesn't have, right? And that's where that comes from. If there was miscommunication, I'll take part of that too, as my fault of miscommunicating. But all of this was was to work together. So you guys had the chance to talk it out as well, and then look at where best to spend the monies. If we recommend something to you guys, the electric lights that cost more, that's where we wanted you guys to put your input, if you can afford it or not this time. Or do we have to go out and find a different budgeting budget for it, or do it next year?
I'm going to go one back further than that too, in that I guess I was really appreciative, I don't know what meeting it was, June, whatever, that we had that. We want to make sure decisions we're making on changes are equitable and not necessarily specific. We want to have like a flow chart. We want to be consistent so that we can address issues of all neighborhoods, and we have a process that will, okay, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this study, and when that comes out, these are some options we have. So that takes a while to do, and I know that Aaron has said they're going to be working with that maybe this late fall or winter, so that when an issue comes up, it's not just public safety making a decision saying you need this or you need that, that we have a process to follow that's consistent. And so I think that will help this situation as well.
Right, I think we are describing the traffic control policy.
Yeah.
And we'll all talk about it. I look forward to when it's available so we can talk these things out. I do want to point out that if you pass something and it's on the next council agenda, guess who the rest of the council is? The Public Works Committee. So we are all here as a chance to discuss it. Is it important enough that we should have it? Some things do need to be moved, expedited through. We don't want to rush decisions. But again, that's just how this one happened. I think it might have been that it was such a complicated request that was made by the residents, lots of brainstorming and ideas. And your committee did filter out some important things and said, well, let's do this and this. I think we could do that. I did have one question, and again, defer to the experts. Is there any rule about how close crosswalks can be to each other? Because there is already a crosswalk at 11th and Morrison. And so picture this as a street that's very straight, and there's a lot of T intersections. Mm-hmm. So there's no sidewalk coming from any side. Mm-hmm. But yet people come from their neighborhood and want to cross 11th Street. So there's already, I don't know how many yards it is away, but that was a genuine question that I had. Is there any restriction? Again, we do have to follow the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Did I say it right? Yeah. Those guidelines, that are set up for our municipality, which I know the Public Safety Committee knows them better than I. But so that was a question, and I was curious about that. So today I would just like to bring up one more point, and that is, I believe, and I'd like to ask input from our experts here, can we designate that section of 11th Street as a school zone? Because I believe in reading the state statute, we are required to designate school zones on streets that are adjacent to the school grounds. But I believe it is our discretion that we may designate other ones.
I think you did that.
I think Chief Williams can kind of clarify that.
He did look into that.
And I may have misunderstood. You and I did have a separate communication, so I don't know what you've told the committee. Thank you.
Yeah, no, from what I decipher the statute to be is that you can't make something a school zone unless it is immediately adjacent to the school grounds.
Well, and I'm going to glance at our attorney, and I don't know if he, put you on the spot, but I think it's worth considering when we see how busy it is. I believe it's Wisconsin statute 118. I'll have to look at it here quick. I can pull it up. Where I felt that it read, but we may designate, that you shall designate, or you're required to sign, but that you may also designate, because as some of our local residents were pointing out, 2nd Street has school zone designation, and it's a couple blocks away from, used to be called 4th Street Elementary, now Willow River. So that was an adjacent street, and that got a marking. I don't know, you're the expert.
Yeah, and we can certainly look at it too and review the statute and make a recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, what we did on Chestnut was that because it wasn't eligible to be a school zone, we dropped the speed limit to 15. Not that it's effective, but.
I'm sorry, the speed limit, right, so that was just a city decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. right, if someone else can speak while I look that statute up if you'd care to. Sorry, hog the conversation.
Anybody?
Yeah, it says, so what the statute says is the authority may designate school crossings across any street or highway, whether or not the street is a highway that borders the grounds of the school. So you can't make it a school zone, but you can make it a school crossing.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Joy?
He's reading it from the statute. I'd have to look back again, so I don't want to hold the discussion up. That was not, if I recall, that was not approved. Anyway, it was just a question mark left at that meeting.
Anybody else? We done? I guess we're done.
So has there been a motion? I move that we adopt the items that the Public Safety Committee approved, which include repainting. I realize some of these painting items are not, so I'm assuming that would have been the process that we would go forward with. They had first motion, second, and approval to repaint the existing crosswalk at, I believe it's at 11th and Morrison, create a new crosswalk at Girard and 11th, and then also provide pedestrian crossing stanchions, which that is definitely a financial item. I believe it was being compared to, say, when people are crossing First Street to go to Lakefront Park, there was something like in the middle of the street. I know that is not
Those
practical.
lime green ones.
They're not practical in the winter when the plows are coming and there's snow and ice, but I believe, if I interpreted your discussion,
You could add to the motion if you wanted that, to direct the Public Works Department to put these top on the list for painting in the spring.
add to your, right, it's a little
You think we could
chilly.
do it then? You might be able to do it next week?
Maybe our committee should go out and do that.
Okay.
Let's do it. I'll bring the paint.
All right, so is that your motion?
Well, could anyone provide information about what you meant? I mean, we're breaking down here now. We're all here. Public Works Committee is here. Public Safety Committee voted to do these items. So I'm asking that as a council, now maybe it is against policy since it wasn't itemized as such. I almost expected this to be just a consent agenda tonight, the items that you had approved in August. So could I get advice legally on, can we vote on those items tonight when they weren't noticed or described on our agenda?
Well, they're described broadly under the topic heading for this particular item, so there's no reason that the council can't move forward if it desires to here.
I'll second your motion then.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Comments here. Pursuant to Municipal Code, Chapter 235-36, the mayor shall approve courtesy ticket days for promotional and seasonal events. Anybody like a courtesy ticket? I, Mayor Rich O'Connor, approve and authorize 3-hour free parking at the downtown parking meters and issuance of courtesy tickets from 8 p.m. on Wednesday, November 22nd, 2023 until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, anybody else? Anything? Motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.